Peter Durand is our CIO and founding partner with Imagine IT, with over 25 years of leading an incredible team that has developed the most comprehensive security protocol for small to mid-sized businesses. And so it's with great pleasure that I introduce Pete this morning.
Thank you. Thanks, Mary. Thanks for that generous introduction, and I think we'll get started. So the presentation we put together, and I've done a number of these, oftentimes in the past, has focused on weaknesses and protections. And we're going to focus on a little bit more today is to really help people understand that, your cybersecurity strategy really starts at the executive level. Don't just rely on IT people and assume they have it covered. And so we're going to cover a lot of that stuff today, and including some simple takeaways that can really help, lock down the organization, lock down the users at both the business and the personal level. Here we go. So just about me real quick. Started an IT company back in 1996. We've grown a lot over the years. We're currently at 70 employees. We currently work with 225 small and medium-sized businesses in the Midwest area. That's generally our focus, probably the under 300 user crowd. And we're facilitating member of the largest national MSP peer group, which means we help other companies like ours increase their maturity level and help them become stronger. So we've got a lot of strong leadership in that regard. Been married for quite a while. I have a daughter. I enjoy traveling and camping. There's a lot of the U.S. I have yet to see, and so I'm excited about still doing some more traveling. And I'm a big Vikings fan, and probably cry November, December, January every year when they lose. We have some credentials for myself. I'm HIPAA certified, so I can really be helpful in not only the healthcare industry, but a lot of these certifications really cross into other kind of compliance, like PCI compliance and financial services compliance, for example. Our company is designed probably one of the country's strongest cybersecurity programs. And we got a big head start on this. We had an ethical hacker that was working for us many years ago for quite a while. And that really gave us a big head start that a lot of MSPs around the country haven't had. And as part of our peer group membership, we get to see what other managed service providers have for their programs. And most of them need a lot of help. They're all a little behind trying to catch up. And I do frequent speaking engagements of this nature. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through facts and figures and numbers. I used to do that in presentations. There was a lot of time spent trying to get organizations to understand that the threat really exists, that you're not under the radar. Most companies get that now. In 2022, if you still feel like you're under the radar, you're probably going to have a bad thing happen to you at some point soon. But just a couple of things, basically just to point out that hacking is a huge business. It's trillions and trillions of dollars every year. Billions of that's getting sucked out of the United States by hackers doing ransomware, whatever it is they're doing, and pulling the money right out of here. And the United Nations estimates that it's about 2 to 5% of all money traffic is illegal. Most of it now in electronic currency. The other thing I want to point out is that cybercrime pays well if you have a cybercrime career. If at some point a young person has to make a decision, or they're approached by somebody in the cyber world, the lure of that money might be a problem, for them making the right choice. So it's a tough thing. Up until last year, I felt like us in the cybersecurity profession had the upper hand. We had a lot of good protection things in place, and it was pretty hard for an attacker, especially in the days of when the attackers were typically a guy in the basement with a hoodie. But it's not that way now. It's mostly well-organized groups in nation states that are doing the hacking. And the problem is that once a new hacking process gets developed, they share it with each other. It's a big community. They share it on the dark web. And so if a new vulnerability suddenly becomes public, some hacker quickly figures out how to take advantage of it. They share that. And now there's thousands of hackers around the world that know how to take advantage of it within a day. It happens very quickly. It's giving the bad guys the upper hand on us. It's very challenging. And you hear about it in the news all the time. You see, the pipeline and SolarWinds and so on. These things are just going to keep happening. And part of the problem is there's so many of these skilled hackers now, that when a new vulnerability gets published, you know, let's say there's 100 of these servers that are now vulnerable, there's going to be thousands of these attackers fighting over that resource, trying to take it over, plant ransomware, download the data, whatever they're going to do. So it's becoming kind of a feeding frenzy, and they're attacking everybody. They attack businesses, civilians, churches, nonprofits, for-profits. It doesn't matter. If you have a checking account, if you have data or intellectual property, they're going to attack you. The traditional security protections of antivirus, firewall, VPN, and passwords are no longer adequate. You need all that, but it kind of in the grand equation of a security strategy, that's about 10 to 20% of everything now. There's so much more that you need to do. It's not overly complicated. It's just, you just need to have the information and know and work with people that understand, you know, how to protect you. Certainly our government cannot protect you. They're having a hard time protecting themselves. It's really up to us to protect each other, protect your own business. And the other thing I want to point out is that there's been a word going around for a long time called cybersecurity, which is really what we would consider how to protect yourself. But businesses really need to think about cyber resilience, which is more having to do with assuming that you're going to have a breach at some point, because it will happen. How are you going to survive that? What are you going to have in place to detect it, to keep it to a smaller scale, and so on, and not have a major impact on your business, your revenue, your reputation, and so on. And the good news, it's easier to protect your organization than you think. So again, I wasn't going to spend a lot of time on trying to convince people that you're at risk. You could Google it and find thousands of links on small businesses that have been attacked and had really bad outcomes. It's all over the place. So anyway, you could find it. All right, your role, stop getting hacked. Thousands of businesses in the United States get hacked every day. And that it doesn't just impact them, it impacts all of us. Again, it's a lot of money getting sucked out of our country to somewhere else. The money's getting used to do bad things. It's getting used to build bombs, or just it goes into tools and research for the hackers to build better hacking tools. It's all bad. And so it's very critical that the strategy is designed to secure the business assets and your reputation, so that you can continue to focus on your mission, whatever your business is. For that to happen, it needs to start in the boardroom. And the reason that is because the boardroom needs to determine, what do we need to protect? What's the most critical stuff? They need to tell IT to align with that. And IT can't just make assumptions. And again, the board can't make the assumption that IT has it covered, because that's been a big mistake that you hear about in the news just about every time, that the board is surprised that it wasn't covered after there was some big breach that happened. So you need to make a real strategy, document a plan, look at where your gaps are, make a roadmap, and continually update that, because it could get lost in a heartbeat. I want to talk about compliance for a moment. So there's a lot of organizations that have compliance requirements. Either you're in healthcare, you're in financial services, you're in a school, you're maybe you take credit cards, whatever it is. And some people think, well, we've checked all the boxes on compliance, therefore we're good, right? Well, the answer is no, because compliance only covers maybe a third of the entire equation of security. Compliance is a lot about processes and training, but it mostly does not cover the actual protecting of the data, detecting things. Just there's all kinds of things that are missing, and so you need both. You need both to actually, your goal with compliance is really to actually protect the data. You can be compliant and still have a breach, right? Well, that didn't help you because the data still got exposed. You need both. So we started working with a business in the Twin Cities about 3 years ago. So as a managed service provider, we were onboarding our tools and doing our antivirus software and things. And while we're out there that first week, there were a number of users that approached us that said, hey, we've been getting a lot of these strange pop-ups on our computer. They're very annoying. Can you please get rid of them? And later that day, our security analyst took a look and quickly determined that there was a key logger on the entire network. So meaning every computer on the network and server was sending all the keystrokes to some external party. We determined for 4 to 6 months. We eventually determined it was to China. So Imagine just the privacy and kind of the horror of the feeling of knowing that everything you type in, your credit card numbers, social security numbers, just private information, you're sending pictures to people, whatever it is, pretty devastating. So once we figured out what happened, we locked it down. And the silver lining is this company eventually needed to have a strong security posture because they were looking to get purchased. And private equity companies, when they come purchase you, they want to know that you have a strong security posture. So we were able to, after locking them down and setting them up with a strategy, that they were actually got purchased. Now they have a very strong security posture and probably stronger than most companies in the city. So what does it look like when a hacking event actually happens? There's usually 5 steps to what it is. Initially, back in the day, they would just send out some kind of mass email blast, a lot of spam to see who would bite. It's very random. What they do now is they target you. They're going to target your business. So they're going to, once they determine who they're going to target, they're going to go to your website, see what they find on your website, who are the important people, what are their roles. They're going to go to the dark web, and there's going to be a lot of information on the dark web about the company, about the users, if there's been any past successful hacking, passwords. They're going to get all that information, and now they get what they need. Now they can start attacking. Typically, they're mostly going to do it via email, but they're also going to probably try to attack the network, to see what they can get through the firewall, through the website, some kind of penetration. At some point, they're going to get in. It's really hard to stop them, especially with the skill level. So it's critical that we stop them right here at the intrusion level. Once they get past this and they're in your network and they can start figuring out what they're capable of doing, then they can start spreading across the network. Just the way that the networks are designed these days, it's kind of 30-year-old technology. They can spread to all the computers, spread to the servers, elevate their privileges. Eventually, they're at the highest level of privilege. They can download the data, plant the ransomware, and they've met their objective. So it used to be about 200 days that they would do it, but because the cybersecurity community is getting stronger, they're afraid of getting detected. So they typically are only in for about 20 days before they finally plant the ransomware or whatever. Usually, IT does not discover them at all. It's the hacker that announces it via ransomware or whatever they're doing. So again, it's very critical that when this happens, that it gets detected right here. Every time you've heard about it on the news, they didn't detect it. The bad guys got all the way to the end and met their objective.
Okay. Just a question about spear phishing. I had this come up in a conversation with someone who actually clicked on a phishing email, and it went into, I think Milo described it as a screaming response, that it threatened to shut down the whole computer. What should I do immediately if that's happened to me on a phishing email?
Yeah, great question. So anytime you feel like you made a mistake, or you took a call from somebody, you maybe let them into your computer, whatever that is, you immediately call IT support. IT support might not necessarily want you to unplug your computer. They might want to kind of check it out and look at it first. If it's just an endpoint computer and you think you clicked and there's potential for virus, I would probably just turn off the computer, call IT support, and let them instruct you at that point.
Okay. Would that be the same thing if you were reading an email on a cell phone?
Well, if you click it, and we're going to cover that today, if you actually click the link on your cell phone, that would be very risky. It's possible that it would plant malware on your cell phone at that point.
Okay.
Yep, you bet. The impacts of a breach, I think everybody here probably knows. They can be small and large. There could be, it could be as small as maybe somebody bought some gift cards for a couple $100. It could be as large as, and we've seen it, entire business bank accounts get emptied. Data get downloaded, reputation harmed, lawsuits, ransomware. A real common issue is just downtime. The systems are down for a number of days, and you really have to think through what would that happen to us based upon the nature of what we do. If we're down, how does that impact us? So depends on the type of organization, the work you do, the mission you have, kind of what's at risk, but they can be pretty serious. So we want to avoid it, obviously. We've had a managed security offering that we've had for quite a few years, and sometimes organizations are a little stubborn to sign on. They're trying to weigh the balance of the cost and the risk. Pretty much every time somebody has a breach, they immediately sign up. They went through it and went, okay, this was terrible. I wish I would have done this before. So keep that in mind. All right, today, the biggest topic at a high level is how to prevent a serious breach, right? We're all going to have small breaches, but we need to keep them small and not expand into be a big breach. So there's 4 main things that we're going to go over today. Primarily, if you want to avoid a small breach from becoming a big breach, we have to kind of figure out where we stand. If we're going to build a gap remediation roadmap, you don't know where you're aiming until you know where you are. So you need to assess where you're at. And then you need to deploy some kind of prevention technologies, more than the basic antivirus, firewall, password, VPN. We need more than that. You need detection technologies because, again, every breach you ever hear about in the news, they didn't detect it. So you need something in place. And then you need a continual improvement process. You need to reassess every year. The threat landscape changes every year. You have to reevaluate where your gaps are and then make a plan to fill them. You can't just, sign up for a program and then call it good. You always have to be looking forward. So there's a number of well-accepted strategies for cybersecurity. So we've adopted the National Institute of Standards and Technology Cybersecurity Framework as the standard. It's the most popular one. And the reason we like it is it's very scalable. This can apply to a 1-person entity all the way up to the largest enterprise. And it comes with 5 pieces. We're going to go over the 5 pieces today, a couple of them probably in depth. It starts with identify. We kind of just talked about this the last slide. You need to identify where you are and have some kind of recurring assessing process. You're going to deploy protection technologies. You're going to deploy detection technologies. You're going to have an incident response process that's documented and that's rehearsed once in a while, depending upon the size of your organization, maybe once a year. And maybe, if you're small, maybe your managed service provider does that kind of on your behalf, that they have one that's well baked. But you want to verify that. And then recover. You need to be able to recover after something happens. That's typically backups and insurance primarily. So we're going to go into all these in detail today. Identify. So first off, you really need a third party to come in and identify your systems. It's really hard to self-assess. There's an initial self-assessment, but you want to go deep as far as really having somebody take a look, do some scanning, maybe interview some people, see what they're capable of getting into. That would be very important. And there's many compliance requirements that actually make you do this on a regular basis. After the assessment, you build a gap remediation roadmap. Here's the gaps we need to fill. We can't fill them all on day 1. Maybe we can fill them over the course of a year, whatever it is, as fast as possible. You need to make sure you get into the budget. So this is really again, the executive level, the board level, to really make sure that cybersecurity is critical, to agree to that, and that you have to get it into the budget. 10 years ago, you didn't have to budget a lot for cybersecurity, but it's just the nature of the world right now. And then again, reassess annually, where you are, look at your gaps, and plan to fill them. So
a quick
yes.
question, if I may, on that. In terms of the assessment, in conversations I've had, some people are indicating that they are receiving training from insurance companies, and you and I kind of engaged in a conversation. Can you kind of explain that philosophy in terms of what insurance companies might really be doing?
Sure. So insurance companies probably don't do a whole lot. They're going to mostly send a questionnaire once a year. It does sort of educate, say, the primary contact on what they need to do. Primarily what they're not doing, though, is they're not actually providing direct training to end users. And we're going to cover that later, where end users need repetitive training, not just an annual thing, to really help it sink in, to make things second nature so they don't make a mistake of some kind.
Okay. So they're assessing risk versus training or educating.
Yeah, I haven't seen a whole lot of training from the insurance companies.
Okay.
Okay. Yep. So here's a problem that we see a lot, and this has been going on forever. A typical organization, they're looking at their budget and what they're going to do from a technology standpoint over any given year, and they're going to maybe add a server and do a firewall, and they lump in a couple of cybersecurity things. The problem is the gap for the cybersecurity is going to be huge, and you can't just do a couple things each year. Initially, there's a really big gap that needs to get filled very quickly. The hackers have just exponentially gone beyond us. So, similar to how you protect your home, you're not just going to lock down the front door and and maybe the garage will leave the back door undone until next year. You have to do a lot of these things right away because the hackers are very skilled. They're gonna find those harder to find holes. So rather than doing a couple each year, you have to do a lot, probably about 80% of the things right away within a very short period of time. Everybody's very vulnerable right now. So here's a graphic representation of what maybe a cybersecurity posture would look like. So this is a typical organization. If we went down the road and audited your typical business, what their cybersecurity posture would look like, notice a lot of red. You know, this inner layer here is kind of what's typically covered, say, by a managed service provider or internal IT. There's going to be antivirus software and spam filtering and a firewall, but not a whole lot else. There isn't a whole lot extra protecting the email system beyond the spam filtering. The password policies are generally not very strong. Wi-Fi, you know, how often does a company change their Wi-Fi password? You know, there's all kinds of things that just don't get done. And then there's really very little in detection and training, dark web monitoring, and so on. So there's going to be a big gap. So it's going to be very important to make this turn green as fast as possible. In 2022, all of you need to have this almost entirely green, or you're just very, very vulnerable to the hackers. And that's why we call it the comprehensive approach. Don't just pick a couple things. You need to kind of do the whole thing. All right, so we talked about identify, which is really assessing where you are. So let's talk about protect. And we're going to spend quite a bit of time in this particular section. Notice the pro tip there. Security must be layered. And so an example is virus scanning. You're going to have virus scanning on your endpoint. And you're going to have it at your firewall. And you're going to have it on your email. And you're going to have it on your web, on your browsers. You know, you type in an address, you want that to be scanned also. That's multi-layered. That way, if somebody you know, so if something malicious gets past the first layer, one of the other layers will detect it. So it's very important. So you'll see that throughout here, kind of a theme. There's going to be a lot of layers. You're also going to hear me repeat a lot of the protections a lot because I want it to sink in. So some of the real big protections, multi-factor authentication. I don't think that's going to be rocket science to anybody in this day and age. You need that on every kind of remote access to your network. So if you have data at the network, it's going to be on the VPN itself. The VPN itself needs multi-factor authentication. You need it on your email. We've seen all kinds of crazy things happen to people's email systems and the phishing and the lost money when somebody's mailbox gets breached. All of your online accounts, your Amazon, your Facebook, your healthcare, everything, you need to have multi-factor authentication enabled. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in detail later. Email. Every email system is going to come with some kind of spam filtering, but there's more advanced ways of doing that to really weed out the malicious files that might be coming along with it. Password management, this is a real big problem that the hackers are finding commonly used passwords by people or for a specific person, and then reusing those passwords in other places and getting in. And when you combine that with lack of multi-factor authentication, that is how most of the breaches are happening. And then security awareness training. We've talked about that a little bit. You need a recurring, repetitive thing so it becomes second nature. So your people slow down a little bit, less likely to make a mistake. People will still make mistakes, hopefully less. So multi-factor authentication, typically it's to your cell phone these days. Bigger companies might have a dongle or some other small device you carry with you. It's critical that you have this. Without it, your accounts are eventually going to get breached. The pro tip there, I strongly encourage you to use an authenticator app, something like Microsoft Authenticator or Google Authenticator. And the reason that is that when you use an authenticator app, the second factor of authentication is tied to your physical cell phone. Whereas when you get a text message, it's only tied to your phone number, and your phone number could get hijacked. So it's better to use the authenticator app. And there's a process for doing that. You know, let's say it's your Amazon account. You log in and you go to eventually where that security screen is, where you want to set up your multi-factor authentication. It'll give you the opportunity to use your authenticator app to take a screenshot of, it's called a QR code, the little square box, and that'll tie it to your phone. It just takes a minute, and we'll talk about the little homework assignment I give you later, which really has to do with doing this. Passwords. So back in July of last year, PC Magazine did a survey of thousands of computer users to find out how they use passwords. And as you can see, and here's really the question, do you use the same password for more than one service or site? About half the respondents was like either all of them or most of them. So this is a big problem. All the hacker has to do is get one of those passwords, and now they use that same password to try to hack all your other accounts. It's a really serious thing. And again, it's why you hear about so many different hacking successes on the internet. Another 25% use them for more than one thing, and 30% say they never do it. I don't believe that. I almost wonder if the survey was of IT people, because I think if you interview the regular people on the street, this number is probably more like 10% actually do this. So very, very important. Again, I have an exercise I'll set up for you later to help you try to solve this for yourself. Here's some of the best practices. And it used to be they wanted you to change your password often. That has become less critical. It's really more important to make them good and unique. So first off, make them long. And to make them easy to remember, and maybe first off, we'll just talk about what's a weak password. If you look at this complex password here, you might think that's good. Hacking tool could probably hack that in about 5 or 10 minutes. They're very powerful. It's not any good to you any longer. But there's something about the exponential strength of a long password. This password here, this passphrase that's easy to remember, this could take decades or centuries for the most powerful hacking tools to hack. And it's a lot easier to remember than this one over here, isn't it? So the other thing is you don't want to reuse your passwords. So each password should be very highly unique. Again, that way if, let's say your Facebook somehow got hacked, they got that password, they can't use that password somewhere else. And this is where using a password manager is going to come in really handy. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. Everybody needs to have a password manager. The password manager itself is going to remember your password so you don't have to. And it'll have a password generator feature so they can make them all unique. So for myself personally, 98% of my passwords are something like this, and I don't even know what they are because I don't care. My password manager is very easy. I want to use it. I go to my browser. Let's say I want to go to Amazon. I go to my browser, click my password manager button, select Amazon. It automatically opens a new tab to Amazon. I'm in. Don't have to do anything. Super simple.
Can I just tell you, as an end user and not a sophisticated technology person, that the use passphrase has changed my life.
Yeah.
It really, it makes it easier for me to remember them. And I do love, obviously, the password manager as well.
Yeah, great. So I want to, that's kind of one of the points I was trying to make here is 98% of my passwords, I don't use a passphrase. I do this. I do. You do need a passphrase for passwords you must remember. I need to remember my email password. I need to remember, there's 2 or 3, your computer password, right? Other than that, as long as I can do it for my password manager, then I don't need to remember it. So there's always a few. All right, humans are wired to be terrible at security. This is very true. By nature, we're very trusting of other people. If somebody comes to you and makes a request, your first instinct is, oh, I want to help them. Right? Somebody needs me. I want to help them. I'm not confrontational, by nature. And so we don't natively expect whatever that nasty email is to be something bad. We want to avoid conflict, right? Somehow telling somebody, no, I don't want to buy your product. No, don't send me email can be hard for people. And I've had in-laws, a couple of them, that have been taken advantage of by a hacker. And the in-law felt guilty about saying no when they called back. No, I don't want to give you my credit card number again. No, whatever it is. There's just something strange about that. Again, we want to help and we're curious. We want to investigate. You get a link. It's, well, that looks really interesting. I want to click that and see what that is, right? So all the bad guys know this. They know our tendencies, and this is what they're going to try to take advantage of. And so that's where the security awareness training is so critical. Everybody in the company needs to understand kind of what's at risk. There needs to be kind of an organization culture of security, and people haven't really thought about that until recently. I don't want my company to get breached. I'd feel terrible if I was the person that caused that. So that needs to be talked through at some point. There needs to be recurring training. So I'll give you an example. A lot of organizations out there, they'll do like a monthly fake phishing campaign. And so each user gets an email with a link of some kind, see who clicks the link, see who makes the mistake. Management or whoever can look at the reports and then have a discussion with that employee. It's an opportunity to help them understand what they did. Typically, again, they just were moving too fast, slow down. Same thing, a lot of this kind of training also train the users on phone calls. And we're going to go about that deeper here in a moment. But a lot of that, there's a lot more hacking going on now via phone calls because the hackers understand that email protection is getting stronger. They're trying to get around that and get another way to get into the computer.
Hey, Pete.
Yes, sir.
What are you seeing now in the world with the crazy stuff that's going on around the world? What are you seeing now that's kind of relating to kind of cybercrime and how hackers are using the conflict to kind of trick people into clicking on stuff?
Yeah, I saw a recent example just this week, and I think some large organization posted about it, which is they're sending out fake phishing email, basically saying, please, pretending to be people from Ukraine, so you would donate to some cause to help the people of Ukraine. So they immediately take advantage of that. And when COVID was going around, they were always trying to send things out, getting people to give you your money to support some COVID thing. So whatever the current hot topic is in the news, they're always going to try to take advantage of that. So that would be something, obviously, the users need to be aware of. All right, I'm going to go through some stuff in detail here. This presentation is really geared towards executives and end users, and executives are end users, right? We all use computers, and so here's a lot of real common sense stuff. And we'll be providing you with a slide deck so you can go back and look at some of these bullet points because there's a lot of information here. So first off, inbound email. This is really critical because a lot of the hacking happens via email. If you happen to be a Microsoft 365, they have an additional subscription. It costs a couple bucks a month called Defender for 365, and that's going to take any email with an attachment or a link and pull it aside temporarily and scan the attachment or link for malicious activity before it gets into the inbox. It's spam filtering has a different job than this, and so that's going to be very critical. Google Workspace has a similar thing, and so that's really important. Almost all ransomware happens in that manner via either an attachment or a link in an email. Set up your email application not to display pictures, and I'll give you an example of that in a minute. I know it's nice when you look at an email, you can see the graphics and the pictures and all that, but there's two problems with that. One is whenever you open an email, or even if it shows up in your preview pane and there's a picture, the sender knows you opened it. It phones home. It tells them that, so they'll know you opened it. And secondly, a lot of times there can be malicious content embedded in the graphic or picture, so it might actually run some kind of virus in the background if you push on it. So just be very careful. So what I do is I have it set by default within my application to not show pictures. If I want to see pictures, I can just right click a picture and choose download picture, and then it'll do it. And occasionally I do that. Hover over the link in the email just to verify the spelling of the URL is as expected. It's a little tricky. Sometimes people use the bit.ly or the shorteners, which unfortunately is kind of an issue. So I won't click those. So if a marketing person wants to send me something that's got one of those little shorteners, I won't click it because I don't trust it. I can't see what's behind it. So keep that in mind. Never click an unsubscribe link. If you're getting spam, it might be a legitimate company, but sometimes you don't know. If you click an unsubscribe link, it actually might be a malicious link. So what I do instead is I just right-click the email, say in my Outlook, and say send to junk mail. That way I never get that sender to send me email again. And then maybe once a week I dump out my junk email folder. It's safer. Never enable an MS Office attachment that says, it allows you to edit or do a macro. That's where a lot of viruses come in. Most people don't use that anymore. That's usually just very sophisticated users, sophisticated spreadsheets for stuff that they keep internally within the company. If you get an email that's got that, be suspicious. Microsoft is actually disabling that by default now. They just started doing that in the last month or so that they know that's a big issue, and they're disabling that across the entire Microsoft 365 by default. An administrator can re-enable it. Now notice I say here, never enable unless you trust it as opposed to the person. So you could have somebody that that's been breached. They send you an email with this document and they want you to click enable, right? Well, that person's been breached, so it's not true. You can't trust the person. You have to trust the actual document itself. When in doubt, call the sender. And we're all probably getting pretty good at this. Look for indications of impersonation. Is there an external sender banner in the email, yet it came from somebody that works with you with the same domain name? That would be suspicious. I'm going to show you an example of that in a minute. Maybe the email address was slightly off. That's a pretty obvious one. Sometimes the timing of the topic seems just off. Maybe it's somebody you normally email with, But then the topic was weird. That kind of threw us off. And I think we've all probably seen that. We've all seen it where somebody we know has their mailbox breached. It's embarrassing, but a lot of people have lost a lot of money because of it too. And it provides an incredible amount of intel to the hacker. If they can look at your email, they're going to know who to attack, who has money, you know, who else to impersonate. So here's an example of.
Can I ask you a question about that? So you referenced that people can lose a lot of money. Do you recommend that if someone's been hacked, and maybe you'll be covering it, where they have indeed, you know, clicked on a link that was bogus, do you recommend that they freeze their credit?
Well,
that's
it's almost like two separate topics there. Yeah. So first off, I recommend everybody freeze their credit. You go to the 3 credit bureaus and you freeze your credit all the time. Just make it a lot harder. It's a little annoying when you're trying to open a line of credit. You have to temporarily unfreeze it. You know, the agencies have made it easier online to do that quickly, and then it's done. I don't want anybody ever having the capability of opening up an account under my name. So, you know, identity theft kind of thing. So here's an example of a theft. You know, somebody had their mailbox breached. Somebody had their mailbox breached. The hacker watched the traffic and they knew who this person's bank was. They emailed the bank pretending to be this person and said, please change my account number, the routing for whatever, to be this other bank account or something. $500,000 gone. Now, to me, there was an issue there with the bank processes. The bank process required a signature of some kind via the email, which of course is kind of silly. They didn't have another step there. But anyway, it can happen really fast. And then the issue is, okay, did this person's cyber insurance policy cover that type of thing, right? And we're going to, you know, talk about that later. So a lot of, and we've seen lots of strange things happen in email. A lot of the time it's an impersonation, and then somebody says, please change the account number for payments to this. And then they got it. So in this case here, you know, I've got the graphics disabled by default. If I want to see it, I can just right click here and see the graphic and then see the picture. Notice here, external sender banner. Some of you have email systems that have that, some don't. I'm going to recommend you have your IT people set that up. So anytime any email comes in from the outside, you'll know it's not from an internal person. You already know that. Like, I can tell this is not from our company. However, what if this said from Mary Book at almostimagineiti.com, right? I may see Mary Book and not look at the address, but then I went, wait a minute, Mary, but it says external sender. Something's wrong. It would have flagged me, right? That's what you're really checking for. You want it to flag it when somebody's impersonating somebody else at your company. Here's an example of hovering over a link. Now, funny, I used the example of actually unsubscribing, which I told you not to do. But in this example, I wanted to verify that this is actually a legitimate email, and this is actually the exact spelling of the domain of what I expect it to be. Therefore, I consider that to be a safe link. Again, it's really hard to unsubscribe any other way unless there's, you know, the website has some place where you log in and manage your preferences, which can be a pain. So again, what I recommend is just have it tell to send that to your junk mail folder going forward, and then you never have to click a link. I will give you another example. So let's say you get an invitation to engage with somebody on LinkedIn, right? We get those invites a lot. I never click the link. Instead, I log into the LinkedIn website and I accept the invite there. That way it's safer in case somebody's impersonating LinkedIn. Here's an example of what I was talking about with the Office documents. If somebody emails you a Word or Excel document, you're going to see this at the top. Don't click that button unless you really trust the document. Again, trusting the sender isn't enough. You must trust the document. A lot of organizations have a button over here, you know, possibly in their Outlook or in their web email that says report message. And what that does is that if you're unsure if this is, I'm not sure this is spam or not, or phishing, really phishing is more the issue, you can click that button. It'll send it to the IT people for review. So kind of a simple thing. Okay, let's talk about inbound phone calls. So first off, this is a big problem, especially for the elderly or people that just haven't been in technology for a long time, is they're going to get a phone call from someone pretending to be the IRS or pretending to be their bank or that kind of thing. Those kind of institutions will never call. They only send official stuff via snail mail. So don't take that call. And typically if IT is going to call you, you probably initiated something first. So if suddenly IT calls you out of the blue being suspicious of that, you might want to, ask them to hang up and then call back what you know is to be the legit number for IT support. If you don't know the legit number, ask a coworker, ask your boss, ask the primary contact at your company. Phone scams are becoming a real big problem. There's been a lot of recommendations that the subject matter experts are telling us, which is, first off, don't answer calls from numbers you don't know. I never do. I just don't want to take the spam calls, but some people still have an issue with that, and they answer the call. You're just setting yourself up for a very challenging discussion with a very skilled hacker trying to take advantage of your human tendencies. Don't provide sensitive data to unknown callers. Talk to your IT people first. Just make sure you find out who that is and what they are. It's very common for hackers as a initial phase to try to hack into your network. They're going to talk to the front line that answers the phones to try to get just a little bit of intel that might help them eventually get into the network. If you get some kind of robocall that says press 1 to get removed from the list, never press 1. Now they know for sure you're legit on the other end, and they're going to keep spamming you. So do not do that. Cell phone best practices. So right off the bat, it can be more difficult to spot phishing from your cell phone, right? On your computer, you got a big screen. You can see all the parts of the email. Yeah, that looks fishy. On your cell phone, it's very different. It's very difficult. Mary's smiling. I can't see Mark's face. I know he's probably smiling. Everybody's probably done this. And I would say, a lot of successful phishing happens because somebody was on their cell phone and clicked a link in the cell phone. So if you're not sure, wait till you get to a computer and then go look at that email. Texting, right? When you get a text, never click a link in a text message, even if it's from somebody you trust. Why? That person may have got hacked, and now they're sending you some kind of text with a link. They say, hey, I just saw this cool thing that I was going to buy. Just check out the picture here, whatever it is. Don't click the link. I tell people to stop sending me links. I'm not going to look at the link. I'm sorry. I love you. You're my friend. But no, I'm not going to click on links when you send them to me. Never provide MFA codes to a caller. So this is how does a hacker get around an MFA code? How they do it is they trick the user into coughing up the code. So somehow, let's say they got the password for your account. They're trying to get into your account. They realize you have MFA. They call you and say, hey, I'm calling from Amazon tech support. I noticed a little issue on your account. I'm happy to help you with it. If in a minute you're going to see a code come up on your phone, I need that code, and then I can fix this problem. And I'll bet you 25 to 50% of people will cough up that code, and now they're in. So legitimate support people would never ask for the code. That's yours and yours alone, and you plug it into the website or whatever you're going to do. Also, keep your cell phone as clean as possible. You've heard of supply chain attacks, right? So what was SolarWinds? The SolarWinds attack was Russia or China, whoever it was, implanted malware at SolarWinds, right? Well, SolarWinds software is used by a lot of companies. So that basically trickled down to all those companies. That's what a supply chain attack is. So what if you've got your cool app on your phone you like to use, maybe it's a game, maybe it's Pinterest, whatever it is, they get hacked. When that company gets hacked, your cell phone's going to get hacked. So keep your cell phone as clean as possible. Only use, if your cell phone is used for business or very important things, I would suggest you get a tablet for the other stuff. Just keep them separate. That's a big problem. This is something I've told the people, and even myself, it's an issue. It's very hard to really separate all that. I don't want to carry a tablet around all the time. Remote work. So as you all know, the last couple of years have been very challenging for that. There's a significantly higher percentage of users now working remotely, either at home or roaming, and that's a big security problem. If they have a business supplied computer, they're in pretty good shape. You're going to have the same, the centrally managed antivirus and maybe some web DNS filtering. If your company's strong in cybersecurity, that there might be some kind of a threat hunting or some other kind of application on that'll really help look for things that got past the antivirus. And disk encryption, the IT can enforce that your laptop or whatever is encrypted, so in case it gets lost or stolen, the bad guys can get data off of it. And some people might think, well, I don't keep data on my computer. What you do keep on your computer is probably passwords. There's probably saved passwords to your browser, things like that, which is another reason to use a password manager, so you don't do that. So again, it's very important to have a business supplied computer. If it's not an option, the entity needs to consider maybe having a policy or something in place where you can deploy those business protections on the personal home computers. But there's some politics there. So ideally, it's better to just provide it with a business provided computer, get it in the budget, because we don't want people accessing corporate data from unprotected computers. The other issues are what else happens on that home computer? Is that a computer shared by the kids? Well, that's not good. We don't want that computer accessing our corporate data. And there can be some Wi-Fi issues. So for example, usually Wi-Fi at people's houses is pretty weak. It's a pretty simple code that people don't change. So certainly you want to keep it long, just like we talked about long passwords. You can make it a phrase, make it a passphrase. That's fine. The Wi-Fi devices are fine with that. I would strongly encourage you to make a separate Wi-Fi network for all your IoT devices, like your internet connected refrigerator and thermostat, all that stuff. Make it something kind of yucky that you set up one time and never have to change it. It's too much work to change those things. But like your computer and your cell phone should be on something you can remember that's pretty long, and maybe change that once in a while, once a year or something. When you're roaming, don't use cafe, hotel, hotspots. Don't use any of those shared hotspots. Use your cell phone data plan for that. And if you had employees that have to do this a lot, you probably should give them a good data plan or whatever it is, or give them a stipend of some kind to cover that, because you don't want them using if I'm a hacker, I'm probably, if I break out my schedule, I'm spending a certain number of days a week at a cafe, in a hotel, whatever it is, because basically when you're on those kind of guest Wi-Fi's, it's the same thing as the hacker plugging a network cord from their computer into yours. So they're going to start trying to do their thing. So you want to stay away from that. Your cell phone, you should have some kind of antivirus on it. There's lots of them out there, some of them free, a lot of good free ones, frankly, on the cell phones. You need something to help scan it. Every time you download a new app or the app's update, it's going to scan it. Things like the Google Play Store have a scanning mechanism, but everything I've read about that's not very good. You're going to want some other third-party thing to scan for that. Like I stated, limit the number of apps that you keep on your cell phone. If your cell phone is no longer supported by the manufacturer, you should really get a new phone. And I just had to go through this. I had a Samsung Galaxy 8, worked great. I had no issues. It was 4 years old. I didn't want to get a new phone, but it was no longer getting security updates. Like, yuck, well, I got to get a new phone. And so you have to do that. You just can't be using older phones that are no longer supported. You need to know if it's supported or not. There's a lot of hacking going on with phones now. A lot of the things we're reading now is, they're hacking, we'll say journalists, for example, via their cell phone, so they can really see who they're talking to, who they're communicating with, and so on. And avoid guest Wi-Fi on your cell phone too. Some people are like, oh, I'm going to join my cell phone to this. My car is getting fixed. I'm going to join to their guest Wi-Fi. No, don't do that. Just use your data plan, if at all possible.
Those are some really good tips. I feel like I have learned a lot already, or great reminders, Pete, especially when it comes to the whole cell phone and home usage of your computers.
Yep. And I'm just looking at the time here, so I'm going to try to get through this pretty quick. The last part of it goes a little faster. So the hacker got past, so we've kind of gone through protection. Now I can go through detection real quick. The hacker got past the antivirus and firewall. Now what, right? Again, every hacking event you ever read about is because they didn't have detection technologies in place. So first off, you need to really make your systems better protected. And there's a number of things that are kind of, settings, your patching, regular vulnerability scans are really important so you can find out what the issues are. Whenever we see those run, it's always finding things like outdated Firefox, outdated Adobe, just all kinds of things outdated that need to be fixed. You need detection technologies in place, or you won't even know if anything's happening. And then a response plan that's tested. And again, the important thing about the step one of a response plan is you have to know something's going on. You can't do an instant response plan if you don't even know you're hacked. And if you got ransomware planted, it's already too late at that point. All right, so there's various kinds of intrusion detection things. Typically, it's something that looks at the network traffic. It's going to be sitting near the firewall, looking for traffic going in and out for suspicious activity. It's different than a firewall. A firewall is really meant to protect you. This is more to detect things after that may have got past the firewall, past the antivirus. In this day and age, you really need something 24/7. Most hacking incidents happen after hours. IT comes in the morning, oh no, bad things have happened. You need analysts working 24/7 that are looking at what's going on. They're going to be looking at intrusion detection, looking at the software that's installed on the endpoint to see if anything got past the antivirus. You need something monitoring the dark web. If Mary, if your password for your Amazon suddenly showed up on the dark web, you'd want to know that right away, I'm sure. And so, IT needs to get notified so they can tell you, hey, you could change that password to any other site that uses a similar password. A similar thing for Azure, AWS, and Google. All right, we're up to the fourth of the 5 pillars of the NIST cybersecurity framework, respond. Basically, you have to practice what you're going to do. If something really bad happens, you can't have everybody scrambling to figure out what to do. You have to make some decisions very quickly to avoid downtime and more data loss. And so you need a documented incident response plan. Typically, your managed service provider will have that. They'll have something they've probably used many times. If you're a larger entity, it's probably something you're going to co-develop with them, and then have an occasional rehearsal at least once a year. And the rehearsal is typically a topic. Let's say it's ransomware. We've just been ransomware. What do we do? The first thing you do is you call your insurance company. I'll tell you that right now. You have to work with your insurance company. You don't want to do anything that's going to suddenly make it so they won't cover you. You have to follow their instructions. And they'll often assign a forensics and recovery firm that's experts at this, somebody beyond your MSP, to actually help you remediate it. And then recover via backups. So you hear about this in the news a lot. Somebody had backups, they weren't able to recover because the bad guys were able to destroy the backups, or the backups just were so slow to recover from that it almost wasn't worth it, so the company paid the ransomware. So it needs to be full backups of all your servers if you have servers. You also need backups of your Microsoft and Google. There's been a lot of incidents now. That's all under attack. You need third-party backups. So if somebody kind of hacks Microsoft, they can't destroy your backups, or just make it take much longer to recover from. The third-party backup is going to really help in that regard, and it'll be a lot faster to recover. Microsoft, for example, is very slow to respond to an incident, 24 to 36 hours probably. Your backup system needs to be basically unhackable. So when you hear about backups that were hacked, it's because probably the backup system was joined to the network, the same admin username and password as the network did. Well, the network got hacked, now they can hack the backups. So the backup needs to be entirely separate systems, separate login name, separate password, separate system, multi-factor protected, so they can't get into it. And you have to test it once in a while. I would say, especially a larger entity, you're going to want to do some kind of disaster recovery test every year. The other part of recovery is insurance. Most companies now have cyber insurance. You're going to definitely want to get it. Review the policy. They cover a lot of different things. They cover things like, your bank gets emptied, reputation repair, downtime recovery, lost income, all that kind of stuff. So definitely look at that. You're going to want both backups and recover via insurance. So here's a graphical representation, we're almost done, of the cybersecurity framework. So remember, we talked about the 5 pillars: identify, assess where you're at, deploy protection technologies, deploy detection technologies, and then respond to recover with the incident response plan, the backup, and the cybersecurity insurance. And the last piece, which is really identify all over again, is assess where you're at. Look at the current landscape. In 2023, it's going to be a little different than now. There's going to be other things we have to protect against. Document your gaps, get them on a roadmap so you get them taken care of very quickly. And again, just a kind of another slide of that. So go ahead if you like. Here's your homework assignment. So if you don't mind, go ahead and maybe take a screen grab of this. You're also going to get this in an email later. What you're going to do, here's your homework assignment. You're going to get a password manager. If your company doesn't provide one, get one. Go to get LastPass free. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of different brands out there. It's going to integrate with your browser. It's going to allow you to make all those wildly unique passwords, except for those 2 or 3 you have to remember. You have to remember your password manager password, maybe your email password, your computer password. That's about it. And then while you're doing that, you're going to make all those new random passwords for each website, right? You're going to go to Amazon, make a new password. You're going to use your password manager to generate a very unique one. Save it in the password manager. And while you're in there, set up multi-factor authentication. There'll be a setting in there. Bonus points if you use your Authenticator app on your phone instead of text messages. Feel free to reach out to us. We have a user cybersecurity guide that covers a lot of this. It's about a 6 or 8 page document that is great. It's really at a personal level. Give it to your family and friends and so on. For IT and executives, you want to take a self-assessment. It's about the executive one is probably 15 questions long. The IT director one is probably 20, 25 questions long. It's pretty easy, pretty much yes, no questions. Do you do this? Do you cover that? And so on. It'll give you a pretty good idea of where you stand. Most companies aren't going to have a very good posture. Then you need to work with a subject matter expert to really craft a cybersecurity strategy to really lock it down and significantly reduce the chance of a breach attempt. I believe we are ready for Q&A if we have any time for that.
Well, Pete, that's just been so informative, and the mics are open if anyone has any questions they would like to direct towards Pete.
So Pete, I've got a question about cyber insurance. I know that a few years ago, at least, most of the cyber liability insurance policies were pretty lame, and a lot of companies thought they had coverage on things that they just really didn't have coverage on at all. I know that you end up reviewing a lot of cyber insurance policies. What are you seeing now as far as, is the coverage good? Is it expensive? Kind of what does that all look like?
Yeah, great. That's a great question. A couple things about that. First off, I review about one policy a week for our customer base, and I've been doing that for quite a few years. Starting in 2021, probably mid-year, they started getting a lot tougher. They used to just ask, do you have passwords? Do you have a firewall? Do you have antivirus? You know, it was really simple stuff. They would insure anybody. The insurance companies got clobbered, right? They're just paying ransomware left and right. They made it very hard. And so either now, if you don't answer, you know, pretty high percentage of yes on the questions, they're going to refuse to cover you, or it's going to cost a lot more. So there's a benefit to having strong cybersecurity. It's going to save you a lot of money per year on your cybersecurity insurance.
And what kind of documentation do you have to show to kind of prove that you have coverage, right? You can't just walk in there and say we do. Yeah,
well, unfortunately, that's kind of true, actually. You can pretty much honor system the questionnaire. However, that's a big risk, right? So if you do that and you fake your answers and say yes to everything, when you actually have an incident, what's the insurance company going to do? They're not going to cover you. Yeah. You lie, right? And they'll know. Yep.
I see Jacob is in the chat box, and he's typing right now. So
great.
We'll take a minute to do that. While he's typing, if there aren't any more questions, I do want to just say thank you, Pete. This was such a robust conversation, and really appreciate your time and expertise on this subject matter. So thank you for your time today. I just want to invite everyone, as Pete has talked about the self-assessment, on April 12th, we're going to be conducting another webinar on why cybersecurity risk assessment is critical in your practice to protect your assets. And we're going to go into a few of the questions that we actually look at when we do an assessment with companies. So I will be sending everyone out an invite for that particular webinar as well.
Great. And again, just to reiterate kind of maybe the two next steps. One is take the self-assessment, and two, just engage with a subject matter expert. It's very challenging in the IT world right now. The amount of information in cybersecurity changes so fast. Regular IT people can't really keep up. You need people that are really cybersecurity experts to help guide you through this journey, and it's a never-ending journey.